last night, I couldn't sleep. I was trying to fall asleep and I was just feeling so wide awake in the dark room. So I took half a sleeping pill and I fell asleep, but I only slept probably 8 hours. I don't think I got to sleep until 1. Woke up at 9 because I'm going to work. And I was driving just feeling kind of angry, so I'm still stuck at the level of consciousness of anger. But then it was sort of morphing and I was feeling like the power of it and feeling like moved to action by anger versus festering in it. And so I was sort of, I don't know, like enjoying the anger or like neutral about it as opposed to resisting it. So it changed in a way, like it made me realize, hey, in a month or less, I could go back to the island, or you know, when I go to California, if I go, maybe I can try and never come back, or just keep going on a journey. Like go on a journey, see what happens. And so my mind was a little bit more focused on that. I do want to see Celine Dion, and I might do this online meditation program because an enlightened master I met years ago is coming back into town. And I was thinking of one day traveling to see him just to be like, hey, what's up? And I do think this struggle moving in and out of paradise is going into paradise, aka kind of mania, and falling out of it, depression. I think it can eventually stabilize in being in paradise consciousness all the time. I don't know if there's other things to resolve outwardly or if there's something that needs to be resolved inwardly, but he has this online meditation course and it's probably about $500 Canadian, so it's a lot. And then there's a chance I might not even be here in September when he arrives. But after I get my car fixed and do my write-up, I'm going to probably sign up for that because I'm trying not to pile too many things on at the same time. And then, yeah, it's all a manifestation of my inner state. I know that it's my responsibility. But I think with the whole bipolar condition, it's not as easily resolved as oh, snap out of it, now I'm fine inwardly. Like things make us mad, and when we don't have the right living environment, it adds stress. And I think that conversation I had with my mom was kind of not good in a way. I think it bothered me, and that's why I couldn't sleep. It's because I'm sleeping in the same energy field. I just explained my world, and now I wrote it in such a way that somebody else can look at it. You know, I've talked to myself all these years from the perspective of maybe helping other people somehow, maybe not with my daily blah, but with something. But again, I had a conversation with somebody who is not a peer. You know, that conversation on that phone could be used against me to hospitalize me. One could say, look what this so-and-so said. They're delusional. They're crazy because they're talking about surviving death or blah, blah, blah. So again, it wasn't the right audience, but sometimes when I get probed in things, it's hard to be quiet. That's the thing. Like if somebody came up to me and asked me about my symptoms, I would tell them about my symptoms. If somebody came up to me and said, tell me about the world that you experience, I would tell them. So it just sort of depends who is there. And I had a conversation with my counselor, and they were open to possibility of other worlds or using the metaphors I was using, whether they saw it that way or not. You know, maybe they did have touched something themselves at some point. So, and then I talked to a friend later, and I was telling them same sort of stuff, and they didn't really understand fully because I was describing impossible things. but they still were able to speak to me in that type of languaging and not dismiss it. So this, and I was saying yesterday, I think that when I was on the island, that was coming into mind, like, how do I tell people this kind of thing? They don't want to know. But maybe if I say it, people can only absorb what they can absorb, so there's no harm in saying it. And it makes me feel more empowered to speak the truth of what I've experienced versus, saying, oh, I have bipolar. But, I in a way, I do have this bipolar up and down thing. And when I was driving in, I was drinking coffee for the first time. Just a small one, but I kind of want more. And I was listening to music, and the music started sounding better, and then all of a sudden I felt like I was in a better state. So, things that we take in from the outside do change our state, like coffee or whatever. And I feel like right now, like boosting myself during the day, I took 1,500 milligrams of tyrosine, and I think I took 2 SAMe, 400 milligrams. And I took, I don't know if I took a bit of uridine. So those are sort of the anti-suicidal things, which I assume give a boost because suicide is a low state. But I do find myself thinking suicidal thoughts a little bit. But then I also feel this sense of like how this ego wants attention. It wants negative attention. Even this conflict having, like with some of my close people in my life, this resistance is like the self wanting to assert itself in a negative way, because the positive way that I am is kind of strange. It's non-linear, it's kind of spontaneous, and I think when I'm around people that know me and they feed off that for a while, then eventually they get mad towards me. So I will drop my state in consciousness because they're not comfortable keeping up with the change. So I think I need to leave and ground in whatever. I don't know what I'm talking about. I think I need to embrace the up and down and maybe show that energy more, because I've been trying to keep the energy down. Before I had a crisis, I was just practicing sitting around, not really doing much of anything, sitting on the earth, giving the energy back to the earth. And then I had the crisis, and now I'm still laying low, and I just want to be like, screw it, I'm going to take the boosters and I'm going to go for it, even if whatever that does, if it builds something that needs to break down more, like a self, and I go through a worse psychosis because of it. Maybe that's the next test, because I laid low this time. The psychosis, or whatever it was, the crisis, the death and rebirth, wasn't that bad. And so now I'm sort of at the anger level of consciousness, so I need to, and probably pride. So I need to move up to courage. And maybe the courage comes from just accepting being sometimes, like using the energy of anger to get up to courage, as opposed to hoping it just naturally changes. I'm not sure. So what I'm realizing here is that I got through the crisis, the worst of it. I went through the pain, the shame, the anger, the pain, the shame, the grief, the despair. I'm talking about Dr. David Hawkins' levels of consciousness. And now I'm sort of up at anger. And instead of being sort of angry at, using that anger energy as an outside movement, like a force to do stuff with, and realizing I got through that crisis. I kind of know how to use these supplements now through a crisis, and also how to get myself into the best kind of situation to go through the crisis. So I feel what the universe is telling me is now it's time to take action and not try to stay at the lower states of energy, but try to take action. And I am taking action, but sort of go back to feeling like one is on a mission to create something. I've had the vision many times. Oftentimes I write it up. I didn't write it up last time, but now maybe I can talk to people about it. And I have met several people lately that could be helpful in, say, moving towards building the Dream Center, which I was told many years ago by a supposedly almost homeless man to build. And when I've been in extreme states, I've so-called dissociated and felt like a homeless person. And I do feel like a homeless person right now. Like there are reasons why my family could decide to ditch me at any moment. And that could happen. It could happen to anyone. Once someone loses the support of their family, if they're not really functioning well, they can end up on the street. So I'm feeling like a wanderer in terms of I'm trying to rid myself of attachment. And I think this anger is myself trying to hold on to some kind of attachment so that I don't feel alone. When I am alone, I'm alone in what I was told to create. You know, and I've started to talk to people about it a little bit from a place of power. And I have felt at times that the homeless people saved me, or a homeless man saved me at one time. So I'm here because of that homeless person or homeless people, the consciousness of homeless people, which is way different than we think it is. So maybe if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, in quotes, it won't implode. So we'll see how that goes. I feel like I need to start focusing on that because I have felt like this whole testing the vitamins and doing this and that to keep myself safe and comfortable is all very self-centered. And I'll still do those things, but I've sort of gotten the handle of it and the hold of it. So it's time to change. And I think it's time to embody my mania, like act kind of like a manic. And those gestures could be what gives that energy as opposed to waiting for the energy to create the gestures that one would embody, the traits they would embody in mania. Not being afraid to change people, because if I'm really weird and spontaneous and crazy, people get a little bit uncomfortable. But I'm trying to keep myself comfortable, but that keeps me enclosed in the perspective of a self that isn't there. So being creative. So we'll see. I'm just feeling this today. It could change, but I feel like kind of going for it. And that could land me in the hospital because I'm being more energetic, which could lead to people interpreting me as being manic, which will eventually collapse. Oh well. Yeah, we'll see. It's 12:07 a.m. and it's really raining outside. It was kind of scary to get home. The highway was hard to see, and I'm not used to driving this car in the rain and the dark, and there's a bit more glare on the windows for sure. So I'm going to see if they can put some kind of anti-glare on the front windshield when they replace it. But anyway, the light switch flipped and I'm definitely elevated, and I feel like love is speaking to me in my brain. I don't want to use the M word that ends in ania. But I feel it's this energy of love that one can't ask for, but sometimes does descend upon one. And it's saying things like, there is no you and me, there is no they, there's only we. And it's saying, you know, the whole history of humanity and religion, what religion really is beyond what we've created as concepts and rituals, is written in our DNA. Like, I'm not original, I'm a human being that, you know, evolved through time or was created or whatever. And we all have that millions of years in common. And then we take these words and opinions in our memory to feel special and separate, when it's like this little vibration of nothingness. We're all virtually the same. And have been this whole time. And then we're fighting over these perceived differences that aren't real. And it's also sort of telling me how the power of love is so much more than the power of fear. So I think fear is on the level of 140 on Dr. David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, and love starts at 500. So it's not 500 minus 140, which is I think 360. It's not 360 degrees difference. It's actually 360 zeros, because it's a logarithmic scale. So fear would have the power of 10 with 140 zeros, and love would have the power of 10 times 500 zeros. So that's a hell of a lot more zeros, which is, you know, a billion is way more than a million even. So, and that's just a 2-0 or 3-0 difference or something. So imagine 360 zeros different. So I feel like I'm understanding more, but it doesn't mean that this energy won't burn out my nervous system if I'm not able to, I don't want to say contain it or maintain it. I would say share it, give it away. So this is what I was talking about. I was trying to get through that crisis to see if I could get through it on my own-ish. You know, basically what happens is the nervous system short circuits and one has to start again from level of consciousness 0, which feels like death, but it's the death of the self, not death of whatever. So it's possible if one doesn't make this energy about oneself at all, maybe there's no death of the self necessary and it can be maintained. But that takes a lot of practice, or it's not even practice, it's learning, perceiving, and not actually making anything into a pattern, because it's the pattern that dies. So there is no pattern, there is no method, there is no formula. Another thing this love said in my brain, not even in words, it's just there in awareness, it said, love doesn't ask how. And anyway, stuff like that, I don't want to get into it too much because it's late and I need to go inside and do the relaxation audio and also put a few things in my calendar or I'm going to forget. And I do feel quite energized. I've been able to communicate. I was able to communicate in the way I wanted with my counselor, my mom, and then a friend last night, and then somebody today as well. So I feel that communication is being listened to. And another thing that I had an insight into in my brain is another human being listening through thought or listening through love? Are the words activating thought reflexes, or is it getting through the thought and, you know, one thought and then there's a space maybe and then another thought? Does some of it get through that space and touch the nothingness of love, the emptiness? in emptiness, there is 100% energy. Everything exists in emptiness and comes out of emptiness and goes back into it. And I've gone back into it several times, and it's freaking scary, man. But this last time, I've learned through what I've sort of described and reading a bit of Dr. David Hawkins' work and Krishnamurti and a bit of Eckhart Tolle and a bit of Rupert Spira, I was able to not be afraid of that, which is important, because it's the fear of fear that is the problem. Fear isn't a problem. We make it into a problem, and as soon as we think it's a problem, we try to escape from it. And the thing is, if we don't observe it from a fearful place, observing fear from fear, that fear creates a separation that doesn't exist. It creates somebody looking at the fear instead of being embodied in that sensation of whatever. If one is embodied in that sensation and delabels it fear, doesn't even call it fear, is with it, it transmutes. If one is with it in emptiness, then it changes and it gets transformed and it goes away. But if we're not able to be with it, if it's too painful, then we do things like, eat or drink or sleep or watch movies, and we can still do those things. But if it's not for an escape, then it has a different quality, I guess. And I speak about this now, but there'll probably be a time, whenever, that I forget everything, because I do forget everything. It's not a pattern that can be learned and tried to uphold. Who's the one upholding it? It's the observer, as Krishnamurti would say. And there is no observer. There's observing, pure observation, without a formula or a pattern. So I was able to communicate pretty well today, and there was a bit of something that came up that I wasn't sure about, and I felt a bit of confusion and conflict over it, and I was able to communicate with a person who would be able to enlighten me about what was happening, and it went really well, to the point where they offered me to stay in their trailer sometime if I need some space. So that could be a good place for the next crisis, possibly, or a crisis. And they offered other stuff. So communicating from a place of love and curiosity versus, and having a dialogue versus being like, what are you doing? Like, it's a totally different quality. And I think sometimes I'm just not good at communicating. And the thing is, like, I have some pretty unbelievable things to say that I've said to myself, mostly. And now I'm saying it to other people, and it's not a matter of if they believe it or not. They're just listening. They're not saying, I don't believe that, so I believe you're crazy. But the thing is, I've already been diagnosed as crazy, so people can think that I'm crazy, and I am. And if one day I get carted to a psych ward being crazy, hey, that's just about starting back at zero again on the scale of consciousness and transcending the levels again. It's like, and I've talked about this before, I've probably said it all in so many different ways. I probably don't even need to talk about it anymore, but I want to say it again from this point of learning, to even to show that I've probably said the same thing 3 times over, but then I forget, and then I come to the same sort of insight again at a certain point. This whole thing is about discontinuity and not remembering and projecting patterns and creating habits and creating a self. It's about forgetting the self. And that's something I was realizing today, is that there's a thing to this whole selfless service. So I wanted to learn if I could survive the crisis on my own, but I also realized that sort of living to survive a crisis is serving a self. though maybe one day I can share that so others can be helped by that. But then the other thing is, like, I really do need to get to a point of embodying selfless service and embodying love. Unconditional love, really, and transcending those lower energies. So those lower energies really do want attention, and they want to create chaos. They want to reaffirm that there is a separate self there. And that makes the self feel like it's not alone. But the truth is, we are alone. Maybe we're not ultimately alone. Maybe when enough of us are able to realize the truth of who we are, that we're human beings, and the power of love channeled through a human being is huge. And thinking in terms of even wanting to uphold it permanently, that is the self. The self wants permanence. The self wants security and reassurance of continual improvement. But this love is causeless, so you can't ask for it. It just comes at some times, and it's there for however long it seems to be, and then maybe it's gone. So something I learned through this last crisis, I didn't really experience that much depression, because I feel depression is a phenomena of the self judging low energy states. Whereas if one is with the low energy states and emptiness, one isn't judging it, it's just there. I laid down, watched Netflix for days, and I didn't feel depressed about it. I just did it. And then went on my way. So even now, I don't want to say there's a self. There's an awareness that there's an elevated energy. Just like there was awareness that my energy was low, so I laid down and rested and recuperated and watched a semi-positive and not too violent show on Netflix. And yeah, so I'm wondering, will I be able to sleep tonight? Last night, I couldn't sleep. I feel like the more I communicate from this high energy, it might make it harder and harder to sleep. So I might have to spend some time just sitting around in the dark room in order to lower the energy. It could be finding out how much I can share that energy. Like, I don't need to keep anything for myself. I realize that I don't need anything. I need food, clothing, and shelter, but everything else, like, I would want others to feel uplifted. And I was really helped by a conversation I had with my friend at the coffee shop last night. He's just a very positive person, and he was talking about how he empowers people and inspires people. I don't think he even used that word, but empowered them with how much love he has. And so just having that conversation with him, just listening to how he talked, I think really, really sparked it sparked my brain, and my brain cells learned something, which translated into the next day. So I do want to spend more time with that person, because I learn from positive people and everybody. And the thing is that everybody has this love, this capacity. I think that's one of the mistakes we make sometimes when we first are acquainted with it. When it first tries to make our acquaintance, we feel like, I am special. I am so powerful, because the ego structures get inflated. Just like when the energy goes away, we think, my life sucks, I'm this sucks, I'm depressed. It has nothing to do with the I. There is no I there. There's no invisible ghost inside of us. We are a human being, and the capacities that we have, we're not even aware of, because we're so busy occupied with this little illusory vibration of words. And so, yeah, I'm feeling like, oh yeah, I did have to take half a Zopicon last night to sleep. I woke up, I felt kind of groggy, and I felt like I didn't have enough sleep. But then I took 2 or 3, like 1,500 or 1,000 milligrams of tyrosine. I took 2 SAMe, 400 milligrams, and I took maybe 2 uridine, 500 milligrams. And then I had coffee today for the first time in over a month. So I'm really energized. I could do that to energize myself these next few days. I've kind of planned a lot with different people. So I don't know how long I can keep that up. You know, maybe I need to plan a rest day in there. Maybe Thursday. We'll see. I really don't know. I feel like at this energy that I feel right now, I could burn out quite quickly. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes when my brain gets too energized, eventually it sees something in the future that it doesn't want to know. But maybe it has to see that. Maybe when one brain sees that, other brains see it too, and then we can work together to solve it in time. I don't know, like, I don't want to make it about a self. So yeah, it was a good day. I hope I can sleep. I'm supposed to go to family constellation meetup tomorrow, and I think it would be good to go because of how I learned there from the lady who's really intuitive. So, we'll see. Thanks for listening. Just saw the clock say 11:11. So I made it downtown and traffic wasn't too bad. There was an accident at some point, but I managed to get around it. And parking was only $7.25. I was gonna maybe take public transit from a certain point, but the weather's a little rainy, so I decided to take the chance that it wouldn't be event parking rate at like $25. So I'm going to go to the family constellation meetup and bring the intention of healing humanity at the level of consciousness. The consciousness that we all share, where we believe we're separate entities and we're in conflict with ourself inside when there is no self inside, and that feeling that there is a separate self inside is what makes us feel that we need to move about based on conflict instead of effortless perception of the beauty of the moment, the beauty of being alive as a human being. So yeah, a lot was coming to mind as I was driving. And so there's a bit of a thing about, do I talk to myself about this stuff, or do I do all these things that I've planned right now? And I've planned quite a bit of stuff in these next few days. I had a weird sleep. I would have like psychotic dreams where I felt like I was like being pinned down and stuff, and felt like I wasn't sleeping very well. But I'd rather the psychotic stuff be in dreams while I'm sleeping. And I was having a bit of trouble sleeping because I only took 5 sunflower lecithin, because the night before I was trying to swallow the 10 sunflower lecithin, and eventually one got caught in my throat, and it took a while for peristalsis to put it down into my stomach, and it was a bit painful. So I took only 5, and I ended up only taking 1 melatonin because I couldn't find the other one. I put them on my bed to take the sublingual melatonin and then fall asleep, but I couldn't find the second one, so I thought, well, I must have ate it, I don't remember. And then I saw it there in the morning, so I fell asleep with less stuff. I didn't take Zopicone where I did the night before. And in the night when I was feeling like I wasn't sleeping very well, I was thinking, I'm not gonna get up and go to this thing tomorrow. But noise upstairs kind of woke me up, and I felt rested, like I don't need as much sleep right now. So I do need to be aware and maybe wear the orange glasses more, because the next couple days I need to wake up. Tomorrow I might wake up early to meet a friend, maybe, and then the next day to get my car fixed. I have to drop it off, and maybe the next day. So I was really trying to make myself sleep a lot for the last number of months, and I was sleeping a lot. So I'm just wondering about experimenting with not sleeping as much and doing more, because now there's that energy there, but there's a chance it could burn out my brain and cause a worse crisis next time. Though I did have speeded up times in the previous months, I remember, but I was trying to make myself sleep more. So yeah, we'll see how it works. But oh, the sun's coming out. I'm talking to myself. So yeah, I'm feeling more selfless, like empowering others, helping others, being kind to others, whereas before I was in this sort of self-centered state. And again, thinking that I want this to continue and get better and better is the self. The self wants more, the self wants continuity, the self wants continual growth, the self wants to accumulate. So this whatever state, it's a really high energy state, it feels like a state of love, won't last. And that's not a problem, because the problem is thinking in terms of things lasting. When nothing lasts, every moment is new and changing, and the brain needs to be able to keep up with perceiving something new. So we can't perceive how everything's changing every moment, but we can perceive something new every moment. And because there is something new in every moment. Like every moment, every square centimeter of space has more energy than the known universe. So even looking at a square centimeter of space for the rest of one's life, one couldn't even fathom or grasp or see all the beauty in it. So it's about being awake versus being blind. I think, Sean Blackwell is right. It is an awakening process, but there are lower levels that. It's funny, I communicated in a certain way with people, and that was more empowering. And yeah, I'm at a place where I'm not afraid of what I'm communicating, or afraid of sharing what I think happened in my own subjective experience, whatever that means. So yeah, lots to be shared, but yeah, I'll keep in contact with myself. And it's not myself, I feel like it's love. So we can speak as love, we can listen to love, which is emptiness. And that's what helped me fall asleep last night. Instead of thinking I need to fall asleep, or will I sleep, or did I take enough sunflower lecithin to sleep, or whatever. And I only took half a trazodone, I didn't take a whole one. like the night before, I realized I approached it more as going into emptiness. And as soon as I saw it that way, as soon as I changed my perspective of what sleep is, then I pretty much fell asleep right away. So it wasn't resisting it. And one can go into emptiness at any moment. Like, going into emptiness is dying to the accumulation. And yeah, so at some point I'll get organized. I do have quite a few things to catch up on, and now it seems like the energy is there in order to do those things. So this is a long meetup. Last time there were breaks, but only for snacks. Nobody left, but I might leave at a certain point. We'll see. But really, I want to learn from this lady. I learn by watching people, positive people or intuitive people. So I want to learn what she does, because I think there's application to help people like me who've been labeled. It's a misunderstanding, really. It's a miscommunication, misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding of who and what we are. And sometimes one goes back into forgetfulness, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem, because one is really surrounded by this forgetfulness and this blindness. So to even be able to pop out of it for a second is a miracle, really. Because this whole design of society, if we really knew who we are, would change really quickly too. Wouldn't take much. So, well, it's already changed. There is another world where it's quite fabulous and beautiful. I've seen it. So it's already happened. But, we don't all exist in the same world. We might have all these bodies walking around, but we think there's 7 billion people on the planet, but we'll never be in the presence of 7 billion people. So do we really know that there are 7 billion people? Are there 7 billion bodies? But most of those bodies are asleep. So are they really fully embodied as human beings? And I think everyone can be. All 7 billion bodies can be, but we're programmed to be in conflict with each other, and that wastes a lot of time and energy. We don't know how to cooperate. We don't know how to operate based on being one mind, like ants and bees. We're destroying the bees. Apparently they're on the endangered species list or something. I saw that. I don't know if it's true. But, the bees are their environment. If there's a proper environment, there will be bees. Even if every single bee dies, if their environment is restored, all of a sudden they'll be back. Matter forms out of light. As light slows down its vibration. So there's bees that are based on light, and when they slow down and become material, then they're back. It's not really that mysterious. There are many levels. The quantum is based on collapsing the wave function of possibility. Well, there are many things that are at this point impossible that are possible, because if one thinks in terms of collapsing a wave function of possibility, the possibility is based on what we believe is possible. But what is possible is way beyond what human beings believe is possible. There's many impossible possibilities just waiting to be made possible. Like that guy running the 4-minute mile and then everyone running it. That's a pretty significant and insignificant thing. So that's why it's important to keep going with the possibility that bipolar is an awakening process, or a process of going between being fully awake and going back to sleeping. And I think that is related to heat and light. So that's one of the reasons we speed up in summer, because it's warmer, metabolism, light, we can see more information, and our ability to perceive is based on the light of the moment, how much light there is. In the dark, we can't see anything. And if we're in the dark long enough in sensory deprivation, we'll start to see things. We'll start dreaming in a way. So anyway, I could go on and on about all this forever, and there's so many layers to it. And that's the thing. Life becomes so fascinating. Living one's own life becomes so fascinating. And it's learning every moment, and it's not like, oh, what do I do? It's not about believing, it's about live. Time to go. I stayed for 2 constellations at the family constellation meetup, but I left at the 3rd because I felt like leaving. And now I'm going to meet somebody about this kind of supporting others who go through this stuff. So I'm not sure what will come of that, but I really hope, in a way, to find someone to co-create with who has the skills that I don't have, like being linear and practical, but is co-creative. So we'll see how that goes. I'm feeling a little bit tired because I didn't have the greatest sleep. It was not really the nicest dreams, but you know, when we share one consciousness as humanity, something that happens to anybody happens within consciousness, so we can be aware of it in the aware space where consciousness plays out. I realized when I was at the group, there's no such thing as each other. There's each same. There is no other. To make something other is to make a mistake, to mistake reality, to alienate some part of what is trying to meet us from our consciousness, and divide consciousness up from the oneness that it is. I have a lot of different energy going through the body today. In my stomach, feels like it's kind of on fire. Hope I can keep swallowing all these supplements and they don't eventually become hard to swallow. What can happen is they can become hard to swallow because of the change in the field of gravity. When one is lighter, the way things go down the tube, they can sort of not go down as fast because one is lighter, and when one is lighter, gravity isn't as heavy, so gravity's not pulling it down as much, so the peristalsis of the body doesn't work the same. And this is how sometimes we can manifest these physical symptoms when we're changing states of consciousness. And since we identify with the body, we think, I have this illness, but we don't realize that when one becomes lighter, but people who one is interacting with are heavier, then it sort of changes relative speed of consciousness, which changes the speed of metabolism. And that's part of how some people don't eat that much and they still gain a lot of weight, because how we are all metabolizing the subjective experience of time is different, is relative. So our speeds of energy, our speed of vibration, it's different, it changes. Sometimes we feel so-called good, and sometimes we feel not so good and heavy. We know how feeling not good feels heavy, it feels like we have less energy. So the more energy we have, the faster the speed that energy is. It's closer to the speed of light, which the speed of light isn't probably even a speed. It's a vibration. So it's an up-down is the speed of light, and it goes up and down faster, so that means it goes faster because it's going up and down faster, but it's really just up-down. And so it's sort of all relative to the speed of light. So we have these bodies, but we're not the body. We're not a separate self, so yeah, it doesn't really matter, but just trying to speak from this level of vibration that will at some point change, and I'll feel more dense, more like a separate self at some point, and that will be painful. But it is painful to live in a non-actuality. We're all one consciousness, and we're acting like we're all separate consciousnesses, which is felt as a separate me. Like a separate ball of consciousness is the separate little me, but there's just consciousness. There's no separate me. So when we separate ourselves, that feels painful. And when we act based on separation, that feels painful at some point. Or we numb it out or escape from it. And none of this is wrong. To see people express emotion in this family constellation meetup is really beautiful. Like, human emotion is beautiful, and seeing people in those emotive states just really makes me feel a lot of compassion, because they're looking for healing, and everyone in the group is participating in healing. So it is really beautiful. Yeah, I'm sure more things came to mind, but I wasn't able to write them down. But I mentioned in my intention to be able to hone whatever gift might be available. But really the gift is the gift of presence, of being present, of being part of existence. We really want to prove that I exist as a separate entity, but you can never prove that. We really want to prove that there's this separate entity inside, but really we are one with existence. It's not that I exist as a separate entity, but existence is. And manifests as the human world through human beings. I'm really seeing the common humanity lately, that we're all human beings. And there's a lot of capacity in the brain when we're not trying to build up an illusion. And it's not wrong, it's temporary. And it's a beautiful illusion. Yeah, so I feel like perception is more focused outward. I'm looking around, everything looks beautiful. And then perceiving the light playing out as the beauty of form is very energizing. And today I could see a light aura around the facilitator, like about like this big, all the way around. It was sort of greenish, fluorescent green looking. That was cool.